Hey, welcome to my new show, From the Dark Room into Your Room. This is Distorted Frequencies with me, Jordan Randall. Today, on our very first episode, we are talking to none other than Blag from the legendary punk band, The Dwarves. Check it out.
How is it going?
Oh, you caught me pre-shave today.
Nice. I like it. I like it. Have you ever let it grow out like fully?
Yeah, I let it grow sometimes. I don't know. It gets all itchy and I don't know. I sort of feel like a Vietnam vet with it, so.
That's kind of cool in a way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, what's wrong with Vietnam vets, right?
Right. Cool, man. Well, hey, you know what? First and foremost, I got to say thank you a million for, taking time out of your life, your busy life to, talk to me for a bit. It's very cool.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man. So yeah, so let's talk about you, Blag, your life, the dwarves, everything that's happened along the way.
I narrows it down.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to take like 10 hours, right? So first off, I want to ask, so the dwarves as we know them, Suburban Nightmare first and foremost. According to this, 1983, was that literally when it all started, or did it start before that?
Well, there's a recording on that Lick It record called I Hate Girls, and I think there's a version of Love Makes Me a Monster, and those were indeed recorded in 1983. So that was very early. I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
Me and Saltpeter were on those. And so he's really sort of the earliest long-term member. Well, him and Simone were really the earliest long-term guys, and I just went to high school with them and we started playing together. And I was very into obscure 60s garage songs, and I dragged them along into that. A friend had turned me on to that when I was a freshman in high school, and I thought it was amazing. And it was pre-internet, obviously, and so you really couldn't find things like that, and they were very obscure and nobody knew what they were. And so very early on, it kind of got tied in with me into rockabilly that had come before, and then this hardcore punk that was starting right then, and sort of punk rock from the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and stuff. So fairly early on, I kind of had this vision of all the kind of cool American rock and roll forms that I liked. And so the recordings actually started in 83 with the Suburban Nightmare. And so that's where it started.
That's awesome. So you were still in high school making these songs. Did that sort of like change? Like, did you have a direction for your life at that point? Did you know that you wanted to be a musician? Like you wanted to be involved in music, or were you going to stick out the school and go the traditional route to post-secondary and then do something else? And then
hey, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I lost you for a second, and I was we'll go back to that question, but it says please ask the host to give you permission to record. I was going to record this it seems like it might be interesting. So how do I do that?
Let me see. I'm recording it on my end, so I can definitely send you all of this.
Oh yeah, why don't you just send me a copy? That'd be great.
100%.
So where were you?
So the question is, so you were in high school making this music, putting together these songs, this band and everything. Was that something that you kind of always knew you wanted to get into music leading up to that point? Or was that something that kind of like happened?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about always knew. I mean, I think at one point I wanted to be a superhero, at another point I wanted to be a baseball player. There were various things that I wanted to be, a basketball player, But yeah, I think by the time I hit about 7th or 8th grade, music really meant a lot to me in a way that my family was kind of musical. My dad loved music. My older brother, my mom, everybody loved music, and it was very eclectic musically. I was sort of raised with, my dad was very into the Great American Songbook and, Sousa marches and musicals and things. And then my mom She liked the Beatles and the Bee Gees and folk songs, and Michael rowed the boat ashore. And my brother liked very abstruse kind of bebop stuff, 20-minute art ensemble of Chicago trumpet solos and stuff. So I had this very eclectic mix of music hitting me. And I was really the only rock and roll fan in my family, which is fun because, I think for a lot of people, it's your parents' music or maybe even your grandparents' music. And so it doesn't really, it's not as rebellious, but for me, I discovered rock and roll and then I did the same kind of eclectic thing with it. And I think by the time, the two things I wanted to do was either music or like something like Monty Python or Saturday Night Live. I was very into comedy. And that's why I loved Frank Zappa so much, because he was that combination of comedy and music. And so he meant a lot to me. And I think, probably by the time I was in high school, I really wanted to be a musician, but I wasn't terribly talented. And I was smart enough to know that I wasn't terribly talented. And so I really credit with the Ramones with giving me the guts to play music and say, okay, that I can do. I can do that. I can't do this Frank Zappa stuff. I can't do this Carlos Santana stuff. I can't do this John Coltrane stuff. I can't do this John Philip Sousa stuff. This I can do. The Ramones I can do. The Cramps, I can do that.
That's hilarious.
And so punk rock really was very important for me. And I don't know if I knew I was going to spend my whole life doing it. I think if you would have told me how it was going to work out, I might have done something else. But it was that was how it went.
That's hilarious. That's great to. Did you find other people in your band and everything? Were they in the same boat where it was like, like we all have this sort of desire to do this thing, create this art, but punk rock seems like kind of the easiest way to get in there because it's not as, and it's weird because it's like, you guys, maybe you say that because the Ramones, it was very simplified music, right? Like very, minimal chords and minimal changes, super short songs and stuff like that. But I mean, like there's a technicality to playing punk music that I think a lot of people aren't super aware of. I think the general sort of notion towards punk music is like, oh, it's just really simple. But I'm like, I can't play drums that fast.
That goes for everything in life. That goes for everything in life. To do anything well is difficult.
Yeah.
You can be a mediocre doctor. It's not that fucking hard. You can be a bad lawyer. It's not hard. There's plenty of them. You can be a shitty accountant. People act like those jobs are very difficult, but then, here's these chords. It's just E, A, and B. What's that? And that shows that they're simpletons, to play as well as the Ramones and create what they created with its perfectly holistic aesthetic is virtually impossible to do.
Absolutely.
Almost no one can do it.
Absolutely.
The fact that they did it, I worship at the altar of them. They're brilliant. And to anyone who says it's simple, as my friend, the Fresh Prince of Darkness says, oh, it's simple. You do it.
100%.
And that goes for the Dwarves too. I mean, I've been getting written off since the 80s for stupid lyrics that had fuck all over them and dumb songs about sex and violence and, stupid, easy songs and songs that, that sounded trashy and blah, 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 but you couldn't be me. There isn't anybody out there who could have made those records. There isn't anybody out there. I mean, you look at something like the Suburban Nightmare record that you're still talking about. Like, we're having a conversation about it in 2021. It started being recorded in 84 or something. I mean, no producer, no lessons, nobody helping me with anything. I mean, the idea that you would still be discussing it, is like, obviously it's proof that, the Dwarves was a very sophisticated group that did a lot of interesting things. I'm very proud of everything that we did down the line, including, a lot of people, like, once they evolve per se, they sort of leave behind the old stuff. And I've never been like that. I think Blood, Guts, and Pussy is one of our greatest records because it's so perfect and holistic, and it just makes sense. It was the first time we attained anything like the Ramones. There's a big Misfits sensibility in there, but it was, the first time that it was like, wow, this looks like something and it sounds like something and it's all of a piece and it works. And I think we've been doing that consistently all along, but to a lot of people, yeah, it's simple, it's dumb, it's easy, yeah.
Nobody can do it the way you guys do it. That's 100% true. And if anyone tried to imitate it, it would just be a poor imitation. Like it's you guys know your craft.
And they do. And some people have tried to imitate it and done a pretty poor job at it. It's not as easy as it looks. It's like anything. And I have huge respect for anyone who puts effort into anything. The more I go along in my life, the more, I'm thankful for someone that cares about how they make a cupcake, because I like to eat a cupcake. And 99% of the cupcakes out there suck. And so the fact that there's that 1% of people that spend their day worrying about a cupcake means a lot to me, and I hope people feel the same way about, the cupcake that is the Dwarves.
I certainly do. I got to ask, where did the band name the Dwarves come from?
It was one of those just list of names things. I put a shitload of handwritten names on a thing. The Dwarves was the one that everybody kind of liked. I think there's a simplicity to it. It harkens back to the 60s garage bands that we liked that had names like the Trods and, the Seeds and whatever. So I think it pointed to that. There's a simplicity to it. It's also kind of cool because now people use the word dwarfs, and I think perhaps dwarfs is the accepted English phrase. So that made it kind of interesting. Traditionally it was like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves with a V.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it works. Nobody else took that name, and I took it, and it kind of suggests little people that are small, so it's kind of a small time band. And yet it's, dwarves are magical and powerful. And so, it's also sort of come to be embraced by the whole Dungeons and Dragons crew, right? They love dwarves. And so, it's interesting in that way.
That's awesome. I think it is a very, it's a straight to the point name. It's very easy to remember. It rolls off the tongue really well. It's really cool. And I always wondered, if there was any, because in my head I was always thinking about the Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and I can't help but with free cocaine and all these things, I couldn't help but tie some sort of Snow White and cocaine sort of
cover is kind of like that. You got the skeletal girl, then these tiny dwarves around her, all shooting her and stabbing her and whatever. I don't know. It's very I guess you call it misogynistic now. We just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
There is that element of Snow White and her dwarves.
For sure. I was gonna ask as well with your albums. I mean, there's actually, before I get there, while I'm on the topic of names, Blag Dahlia, Blag the Ripper, Blag Friday.
Yeah, I've sort of been settled with that one. I have a new pseudonym for my acoustic and my more rootsy Americana thing that I'm doing now, which is Ralph Champagne. So that's a new name you can get out there.
It's classy. I like it.
Yeah, Blag has been, it's unique. It's like Cher or something. There's only one. But it's also kind of, it's been an albatross around my neck at times. I don't know. It came up because I was hunting around for a name, and I think we were playing a show somewhere, or I can't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow I wound up staying at a squat house kind of place, and it said Black Jesus, and I said, well, that'll be me. I'll be Black Jesus. So it was like, what's your name? No, Black Jesus. Like, you ain't Black Jesus, buddy. Like you can't be that, And I was like, okay, well then I'm Blag Jesus, And again, it was just a very throwaway kind of thing. And I thought Blag was funny, like Stiv Bader or Iggy Pop, like Blag, okay, I'll be Blag, And now it's like years later, I'm saddled with it, You really want your daughter to bring Blag home,
That's great. It's a great name, honestly. I think it's perfect because I don't know, like it invokes a lot, like, or it evokes a lot. Like there's
now it would be like Blag Lives Matter, right?
I was gonna say
if people could make jokes anymore, I don't know.
Well, I think it's just the word in itself for some reason is like it's funny. I can't even say why, but just phonetically Blag, it's just there's something about it that kind of it's got some sort of comedy behind it, and I think it's great. And I like the new name too, Ralph Champagne. That also has some sort of like layer of comedy behind it that's
right.
awesome. What is Ralph Champagne? Do you find that
I have to give props to Josh Freeze because he came up with Ralph Champagne. That was totally his name, and I was just like, I'm stealing this. That I'm stealing this.
Do you ever find that like using so many different names is a detriment to yourself? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And just calling people, you'd call people in the industry. It's like, Blag for the president of Warner Brothers. It's like, yeah, tell him to go suck a dick, So yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of times when being Blag was not very helpful. I probably, again, it's one of those things I probably wouldn't have done had I known all the ramifications of it,
That's so funny. So with this new record that you're making under the name Ralph Champagne, is that kind of in a way like called Ralph Champagne to kind of get away from the Blag?
No, after I made the record, I said, what am I going to do with it? I mean, it'll still be produced by Blag and written by Blag. I thought it was a different guy, I thought it was a different guy. It's more Americana, it's more country, it's more, more heartfelt, more three-dimensional than a lot of the music that I've made. And it's more loungy, whatever, I still wanted it to be funny, Ralph Champagne. I mean, I never really get away from like the humor aspect of things. But a lot of times with the Dwarves, and especially, with a name like Blag, and you're very, you talk about violence and you do these things, people assume you mean it. It was always, I always kind of felt like Casper the Friendly Ghost. I'd come walking in and it was like, oh God, everybody was running away, and it was like, hey,
yeah, everything's
pretty
cool.
regular guy. I like to pet my cat, and I'm not like fucking, but we were very successful at getting people to believe that was what we were, to the point where a lot of people fucking avoided us, and a lot of record labels avoided us, and a lot of industry people avoided us. It was like, oh, okay, good luck with all that, asshole. Go do that. And what always made me laugh, you'd go through your life in rock and roll. There was guys with regular names, and they were junkies, and they beat their wives, and they were, fucking rip-off artists, and they did, fake, it's a guy in the 90s, a big major label deal. I mean, before he got his big major label deal, his specialty was putting on fake benefits and keeping all the money from it. I mean, I've known people that did all kinds of crazy shit, but they masqueraded as civilians,
Yeah.
The Dwarves never masqueraded as civilians. I never tried to put on a white hat. I never pretended for 1 second that I was doing it, for anything other than sex and love of self and, love of hedonism. And, so yeah, I think Blag and those kinds of things, and the nudity and the thing, just have to say, look, fuck you if you have any pretensions about what this is like, and then you had to come back around to it. And I think, as you did, come to the conclusion like, wow, there's some amazing musicianship here. Wow, there's some pretty cool production here. Wow, there's some pretty great songwriting here. Wow, these covers are actually kind of artistic. Wow, and meanwhile, shit that surface is much easier. I mean, in the 1990s, you had your hair and you looked like a grunge guy, and you put it on the surface, and you were Candlebox, and you got your money and your deal. And then it was the pop punk era, and then it was like, well, you were Surface, and you put it out there, and you were Blink-182, and you got your deal, and you did your thing, and God bless them. All of those bands did some interesting stuff. it was never what I wanted to do. It was always, I never had ambitions toward anything but making amazing records, playing amazing shows. I always thought the industry was a bunch of jokers. I always thought it was systematically unfair and didn't work for artists, and that you were either on top exploiting or on the bottom being fucked, and there really isn't any other place that you can be.
Mhm.
And so, it was sort of, I don't know, maybe I've gone off on a tangent here. I don't know, you asked me about the name, so I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember what my question was either.
But the record that I made now,
Right.
after it was done, I looked at it and I was like, I don't really know if I want this to be Blag. I don't know that Dwarves fans are going to get it. I think a few of them will, and will be like, I love this guy, he's a genius, and this just makes me feel that much better. But a lot of them will just be like, where's the loud guitar? Where's the fast tempos? Fuck this. I don't like this, and that's fine. They have that choice, And so I thought, just to make it, harder for people to just dismiss it out of hand, it would be like, okay, this is a different name on it, but that can really work against you too. Then people that might have heard of it don't hear of it, or people don't know about it, or don't want to take a chance on it, or whatever. But, I'm not really clinging to this name or that name or whatever, there's only one Blag, it's me, and I do various things.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, like, I think that that's a big part of you, or at least it seems that way, is that your decisions are not necessarily like in line with like commercializing your music or anything. And I think that that's what keeps the purity of what you do so pure, and like it translates to the listener, because it's, it's like any of those things. Once you start, once it becomes a job, like you can see the soul get sucked out of it. And it's like, I think for you guys, you've always been on your own terms for the most part. That translates. Like every song sounds like a song that you wanted to write.
Yes, yeah, and I think that goes for my friends too. I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie and friendship in the Dwarves, and there's a lot of people who've helped me do this. There's a lot of people who wrote those songs that you assume that I wrote. There's a lot of people who came up with that instrumental part that you assume I came up with. And I'm glad to take the credit for it. I mean, I put in more work than everybody else. I did more shit. I, tied it together more than everybody. But, I mean, it is a job because it's how I pay my bills. There are commercial considerations. There are things you don't do that maybe you want to do because, I don't quite want to go there, I mean, so there's all kinds of, I don't want to give the impression that I'm unfettered by any limitations. I like money. I like to sell records. I'd rather sell 1 million records than 100,000. I'd rather sell 100,000 than 10,000. So I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, I mean, I think most people are just very limited artistically. And if they come up with a good idea, they come up with it once, and then they sort of repeat it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then there's people who are eclectic but not very good. There's all kinds of combinations of people who do this, that, and the other thing. I've gotten a lot of respect from people who value authenticity, but even sometimes that breaks my heart. I played a record, I remember, for somebody once who was a fan, and he said something that I know he thought was a compliment. Man, you just don't give a fuck. And what he was trying to say was, you don't care about commercial concerns, or you're not worried about what other people are going to say about you or whatever. And I appreciate it on that level, but, it kind of broke my heart because I had just spent a year making this fucking record, obsessing on every detail of it. And it's like, that's how a lot of people interpret me, is, oh, he just doesn't give a fuck. Whereas like the average person who makes his average ass record that isn't going to offend anybody, and that colors very much within the lines, and that doesn't upset anybody, that's a pro. But me, well, I just don't give a fuck, right? It's like, so there's all kinds of ways to interpret that stuff too.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, it definitely shows too. Like, like I think that you you manage both, you balance both of those things, because it's like the impression of not giving a fuck is obviously on the records, but the level of detail in the production, the arrangement, and everything, and honestly, something that I mean, I haven't necessarily heard too many people say, but I feel like they all know, is that you've got a fucking awesome voice.
Oh, thank you. I
And
really appreciate that.
seriously, because like the range, like and the variation that you're able to do is something that is truly, it's truly amazing. Like that there are so many songs that sound so different just in the way that you're sort of tailoring your voice to the song. And I
Oh,
feel
I
like
really
it's,
appreciate that. The Ralph Champagne record will really blow your mind on that account. I mean, this was the I sort of had my pandemic revelation, and the it's funny that you say that, because all of my other records, it was like, rehearsal first, tracks first, and then I'd sing it.
mhm.
And this time, there was nobody to rehearse with. There was no group. There was no, what do you do? So I just played an acoustic guitar, which always sucks. But, figured out with Andy Carpenter, who's my production partner, okay, what key is this song in? What tempo should this song go at? But after that was done, I just sang the whole record down, and then went to people like Josh Freese to play drums, and Nick, Tom Ayers to play bass and guitar, and these various guys, and they then, we sort of arranged it after the fact, so everything came from the vocal.
Wow.
And for that kind of a record, I don't think I'd do it any other way now. It was such a revelation to do it that way, and such a good feeling to have my vocal done already and be able to say, okay, now let's make a track. It took all the pressure off me, as opposed to going, oh, how am I going to sing this the whole time? And so that was really nice. I think there's something to be said for vocals first on a vocal heavy record. I think when you're making punk records, it's a little different, and it's more of a band effort.
Mhm.
But even at that, back in the day, I would sing with the band while we recorded. Then that stops at a certain point. People say, "Well, that's not the professional thing to do." Okay, and then you go back and you figure out, singing with the band is good. But yeah, for this one, it was very much like stretching my voice to where it could go. And again, I have to thank Andy Carpenter a lot, because he keeps me honest with what my range is and what my abilities are and what I can actually get away with and what I can't. And then he goes back after the fact and tunes me and edits me so that I come off a lot more brilliant than I maybe actually am.
That's a good person to have that has the magical powers to do that. But I don't think that he would need
Before
much
that, it
magical
was
powers.
Eric Valentine who did that for me. He was the first guy that ever did that for me. And of course, Eric went on to be a real legendary producer. I mean, untouchable sonically, every different genre. I mean, he's just a giant, and the things that these guys taught me about vocals, and the things that you can do, both in the way you record them and the way you take them on, so I'm glad you enjoy them. Yeah, usually the only people that talk to me about my vocals are other singers. So how did you get that? Especially like punk singers, like, fuck, how did you do that? And I think, one thing is that, and this really helped my production with everything. I hear a lot of records and it's sort of like, okay, here's our drums, and here's the best drum sound we could get. And here's our guitar, and here's the best guitar sound we can get. And here's my vocal, and it's the best vocal we can get. And what they forget is that it's all kind of mixed together. So, what Eric Valentine showed me was shit like, yeah, put your snare through a guitar stomp box till it goes, and by itself, it wouldn't sound like anything. But when you add it in there, it's like, oh shit, now my drums sound kind of cool. And then, you take your guitar and you can put it through, the old rotating Leslie speaker from a Hammond B3 organ. And it's like, oh shit, now the guitar sounds like the Beatles. And so with the vocal, I would do things like simultaneously speak a part so that you got the lyrics, and then simultaneously have it be going through this heavy EQ that's cutting it down till it's like all mid-range and it sounds like it came through a CB radio. And so now you get that grit and it kind of sounds like a guitar, and on and on. You know, so people would ask me like, how did you do this or that vocal? And it's like a lot of gear, a lot of experimentation, a lot of brain work, and trying to sing it real well, and practicing it before I sang it, and doing it in chunks and blah blah, you know. And it was like guys would just be like, fuck, you know, I just kind of walked in and sang it. It's like, well, that's why it doesn't sound like that, you know, because you know what I mean? If you're gonna start rolling your eyes right away and be like, oh fuck, I just kind of want to go in and sing, well, good luck to you. And for a lot of kinds of music, that's the right way to do it, you know. But if you're trying to get your voice to come over super loud guitars and have drums punch through and still have there be some semblance of bass, you know, which is kind of what a hardcore record is, you know, I had to pull out some tricks to get vocals like I got, and motherfuckers want to get that, and it's like, put in the work, you know.
Yeah, well, that's like, yeah, and it shows, because I mean, yeah, a song like, you know, like that Eric like and you produced Fifu, like that song always to me has been really impressive in the sense that it's so loud, like in the choruses and stuff, but everything is very clear, like the clarity is there, and especially like right at that very last chorus, like there's like a guitar solo that sort of comes in as well right after it, and the clarity of that, but the punch of it is there, like nothing gets lost.
I mean, Eric has made a science out of sonics in a way that I never did and can't really hear or understand. I mean, maybe I'm hearing it subconsciously, you know. I knew that he was really somebody that I could employ to make all of the better, you know, make all of the parts of my records that I didn't like better. And yeah, something like FEFU, you get the advantage of that's really his track. I mean, he came up with that beat. He came up with that thing. He was listening to a certain type of music at that time and said, why don't you do something like this? And for me, that's always the challenge, because I'd never write a song like that. And so he writes it. And then I came up with lyrics that I thought were like, ooh, this could go on the radio. Because that's what I do when I'm with Eric. It's like, oh, okay, you know, like for me, it was like, I'd rather have him call me up and go, let's do a track, which he never really did, then go, okay, I'll do your Dwarves record, right? Because I know the limitations of my songwriting and my Dwarves record. So the example of something like FEFU was like coming soup to nuts from the beginning with him. So I wrote something that I thought was good and had what wound up being the vocal melody of FEFU, and you know, but the lyrics were like, hey, we could get this on the radio, Eric, you and me. And he looks at me like, I work with all these fucking assholes for big money to get on the radio, Blag. Nobody's putting you on the radio. Do something, Blag, on this. So then it was like, you know, things turn around on themselves. I'm looking at him like, make me something more commercial. I'll do something cool. And he's looking at me like, let's have some fun. Scream fuck, you know? So I was like, okay, you know? So then I come in and I go, okay, I'm Blag again. I'm going to fuck, eat, and fuck you up. Originally, I wrote that song as Unify.
Really?
Yeah, because I was like, cool, Eric finally made me a track. I've been working on this guy 5-6 years. He never made me a track, you know? Okay, you know, let's do this. But you know, yeah, that gives you some, you know, clue into my mentality.
Yeah,
like I try not to let my limitations bring everything I'm doing down, but rather let other people's stuff make my shit bigger and bigger. But a lot of people view me like, Eric doesn't want me to try and make a pop hit. First of all, he works with those people so much that he knows I'll never get it because I'm not 18 and cute and dumb. And that's who gets a hit. So, and I'm not, you know, Slash, where it was like, well, I had a hit, so maybe I'll get another hit, right? So Eric kind of knows who he's working with. He said, with me, it's like, Blag, I'm not here for your money. You know, I'm here for you, you know, like, because you're the only guy who'll say this and do this. So do it, you know. And so I think it goes that way with Josh Freese a lot, too. I mean, Josh plays with Sting and Nine Inch Nails and just everybody who's richer and more famous and popular than me. So why does he play with me? He wants that, he wants that Blag thing. He's not looking for me to make some pop hit that he can play on. He already played on Miley Cyrus's pop hit last week or whatever, So he did it. Like, that was a weird thing that happened. Like, I went to these guys for them to make me better, and they came to me to do something cool again.
That's hilarious. Well, what'd be cool would be if you ever released a version of FEFU as the Unify version with the other lyrics.
There's no full vocal of it, unfortunately. But you know what there was? At that same time, Howard Stern was still on regular radio and was having a big battle with the FCC. And so I thought, ooh, this is a great track. Let's send it to him with lyrics about how the FCC sucks. So there's a thing called FCC Sucks, using the instrumental of FEFU, edited down. And I specifically mentioned Howard and put some things in it, and I sent it to him, but I'm sure they get a big avalanche of things. And I wasn't known or famous. And so, it didn't get on there or whatever, but it would have been cool if it did, because that would have been a neat other side of that, to get out,
Totally. Yeah. What happened to that version? Is it still like on a hard drive somewhere, or?
Yeah, it's on a hard drive somewhere. Like a lot of stuff these days. I think a lot of stuff gets lost now. It would be interesting to put that on a box set or something. It was sort of topical, so it doesn't make a huge amount of sense now. Can you excuse me for 1 second?
Yeah.
I made this smoothie last night, but it was more than I could eat or more than I could drink. So I never know what to do with it after, so I froze it. Now I'm just watching it, hoping that it'll melt at some point.
Yeah, that's a tough thing with a smoothie. It's like you can't put it in the fridge because it'll definitely melt. And if you put it in the freezer, then it'll definitely freeze. So there's no.
These are the quandaries that confront us now. Yeah,
the struggle is real. We need to invent some in between fridge and freezer device that'll help everyone in this boat of trying to preserve a smoothie. You can't be the only person.
You got to get on that. It's up to you young folks. It's not going to be me. The technology is beyond me, but I'm going to
make a fortune on this idea.
People talk about climate change and economic inequality. No, we are going to preserve smoothies. Yes.
100%. That's what matters. That's what's going to keep this world spinning. Smoothies. So yeah, you touched on it a little bit with regards to like singing over the band while they're playing for Dwarf stuff, but I wanted to ask you kind of what the songwriting process is from your end. When you're working with a Dwarf song, is it a matter of something like you were saying where you're kind of singing over top of the band playing? Are you just kind of formulating like melodies and then kind of after that coming up with the lyrics, or do you come in with an idea of lyrically what you want to say and then try and fit that into a melody?
It's all of the above, to be honest, with the Dwarves. That's part of what I like about it. One element is that everybody writes songs and writes lyrics. And He Who Cannot Be Named wrote great songs and lyrics. Saltpeter wrote great songs and lyrics. Fresh Prince of Darkness writes great songs and lyrics. Nick Oliveri writes great songs and lyrics. And a lot of the time, whatever he writes, I can't even sing it. There's Josh Freese, which always it's like, hey, why'd the drummer leave the band? Because he had a song, I mean, it's like even Josh on the last record, and he had a song on Take Back the Night about the Dwarves called Everything and Moore,
Right.
Rex Everything and Badge Moore. So, I'm privileged to be around guys that can write songs. So that's one part of it where I'll just take somebody's song and tweak it here and there and make it Dwarves. So that's one side of it. I used to pretty much, like, if you go back to records like, you had Lick It there and Lick It was actually written by Simone, who also wrote Fuck You Up and Get High. Everybody assumes I wrote that. So even in those days, I always had great songwriters around me. but you know, if you take some of the songs that have come to be sort of Dwarves classics, you know, Everybody's Girl, You Gotta Burn, you know, Salt Lake City, you know, those are just songs that I came up with a phrase and then wrote it on a guitar. And some of the more hardcore songs, I just kind of came up with a guitar riff, chord riff, and then put words over it after the chord riff. But for the most part, I come up with like vocal melody phrases.
Right.
So I remember like being on the Bay Bridge and I thought, let me show you how it's done. Like I was driving across into San Francisco, and for some reason that just occurred to me. And then I was like, okay, so then I just go home and figure out what the chords would be to that, you know? So a lot of times it's that. Around the time of when Pro Tools became a lot bigger and I had a Pro Tools rig, you know, around the time of Must Die, I started writing from loops because I thought, okay, you know, I'm a pretty limited guitar player, and I had sort of done what I felt I could do on a guitar. So I came up with things using loops, any kind of loop. It could be a drum loop. It could be a loop from an old song. It could be a loop of just a noise thing or whatever. So I do that a lot. And the other thing that I do a lot is just guys will, you know, He Who often would just come up with chord progressions, and then I would just make up a song around it. Or like One Time Only, which is one of our better kind of pop songs. That was Marquis de Sade, Danny Bland, who came up with that. He just came up with chords. So then I'll come up with vocal melody and lyrics. And so yeah, I like working all those ways. I like working, if I come into the rehearsal space and Fresh Prince says, I got this guitar riff or something, then it's like, let's go. I mean, I can write a song over anything is what it comes down to. And I'm, you know, I'm glad of that. Like I'm unmoored from, so there's a lot of people, it's like, I must be in this room with the white wallpaper and just my piano, and then I write my song my way. It's like, well, good luck to you. You know, I can write a song in a fucking wind tunnel or on a B-52 bomber. I can write a song in an air raid shelter. You know, I can write a song anywhere with anybody that comes from anything. And if you tell me, here's a song for a woke, you know, female acoustic guitar player, I could write that song too. And if you tell me this one's an ad for toothpaste, I could write that too. You know, it just, I can just write any song.
That's amazing. That's a true testament to your creativity, I think. And it's funny because like I was listening to like you know, this record here, and it was funny because I was thinking to myself, like how do you come up with some of these lyrics? Like for instance, I was thinking about Here's Looking at You. And I was like, I imagined in my head that the scenario leading to the birth of those lyrics was like you having a conversation with someone, and someone said like, here's looking at you, kid. And then someone said, where did that expression come from anyway? Was that made up by like a pedophile or something? And then that was the progression of the song. I mean, I'm probably totally wrong, but
completely wrong, but interesting. So Here's Looking at You was written pretty much in its entirety by Sergeant Saltpeter, who is an amazing songwriter. He also wrote Trailer Trash, which everybody thinks I wrote. He writes great music and great lyrics, and he's an awesome bass player. So he wrote Here's Looking at You. Here's the difference, though. Here's what makes it Dwarves. First of all, I put in the line, masturbation is the sincerest form of flattery, which to me is the funniest line in the song.
It's hilarious.
But everything else is really Saltpeter, and the whole concept is him. And I give him so much credit. One of the differences between me and Saltpeter, so he writes the song. And the way he means it is in the Casablanca sense, right? Here's looking at you, kid. You know, you're talking to a beautiful woman and you say, here's looking at you, kid. And so his idea was, it's a peeping Tom who's in love with the girl next door. So his starts off kind of creepy. But by the end, you know, she's his bride and they've gotten together because it's Pete and that's how he thinks about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go, okay, dude, here's the thing. If the Dwarves do a song called Here's Looking at You, Kid, everybody in the world is going to think that it's a child molestation. So we're going to have to lean into this if we're going to do it. If we're going to do this, you're going to have to do that. Now, I wouldn't sing a song about child molestation because that's just one of the lines that I draw. However, you know, this is coming from somebody who wrote the song Demonica about, you know, falling in love with the 13-year-old. There's a difference between falling in love and molesting somebody. There's also a difference between peeping at somebody and molesting them. But I don't draw a line with these things. Like, I wouldn't hate another band for writing a song specifically about, you know, having sex with an underage girl. I personally have not written that specific song, but I've written songs that come so close to that they skirt the thing, and people would say, well, fuck you, you know, you're already there. You know, I write the songs that I'm comfortable writing. And anyway, he wrote it more as a creepy love song about a regular aged girl. And I said, if you put the word kid in there, instantly everybody's going to think it's about kids. So then, but I was like, okay, it's peeping. So here's what the guy's doing. He's peeping on kids. Specifically, there's a line in there that says, masturbation's the sincerest form of flattery. And I can never be your lover, little Lady Chatterley, right? Now, how many people in punk rock songs are referring to Lady Chatterley's lover? I would imagine none. Yeah. But also, it clearly says in it, I would never act on this. However, you know, that's the guy's obsession. He's obsessed with this little girl. So I cut out his whole ending about having a happy romance with a regular aged girl. I put in the one line about, you know, he said, I don't need no one's permission for a nocturnal emission. And I said, well, okay, I'm going to say I don't need your mom's permission for a nocturnal emission. So again, I slightly tailored it to the kid thing. But I was the one who leaned into the kid side simply because the song was called Here's Looking at You, Kid. And I knew that that was what it was going to be taken as. And nobody was going to take it as like, no, it's like the Casablanca toast. Here's looking at you, kid, right? So yeah, this is how things go. It's like a combination of things. Now, I wound up taking a lot of heat for that. Fat Records was going to put out an EP of it. Fat Mike specifically asked for that song because it's a great pop song. Mm-hmm. And then supposedly people at the label who worked there objected to it. I think it was right as the Me Too movement was coming out. And again, I just thought it was so pathetic because it's like, there's a difference between Harvey Weinstein raping people, which I don't approve of, and people writing funny songs. Those are two different things. If you can't see that they're different, then you're dumb. And as far as I'm concerned, the PC folks at Fat were dumb and made their dumb little statement about it. I love Mike. We've been friends for many years. He writes songs that offend a lot of people and says things that offend a lot of people. So I thought it was particularly egregious, but you know, that particular song cost me a lot. But at no time did I say, well, I didn't even write that song, right? Because I'm sticking behind it. I sang it, and I'll go down with the shit, you know? So yeah, that's an interesting song to bring up on a number of levels. And it kind of shows you the deconstructivist process of the Dwarves. But really, Saltpeter deserves the credit if you like that song. And if you hate it, I'll take the blame, you know.
That's hilarious. Well, I, for one, love that song. I think it's phenomenal on all the layers that it hits on. It's hilarious. It rocks. And everyone did it.
What about the solo in there?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that solo rips.
I mean, what happened was Fresh Prince of Darkness had sort of done his typical great Johnny Thunders lead in that. And I'm like, that's just a little lazy for this one, man. I don't, you got to come up with something different.
Well, it rips. It absolutely rips.
And again, I mean, for me, that's a lot of what production is. It's not so much, there's some people who are just fabulously talented and they'll specifically go in and tell you, this is what your guitar solo should be. And then they'll play it for you. I mean, I admire guys like that. I wish I had those kind of abilities. But, the way I do it is I get a great guitar player like the Fresh Prince. And if he doesn't play what I want to hear, I go, can you do something kind of like, and then he comes up with something great. And so in the case of that, I never would have written that solo. Mm-hmm. And yet for me, it really ties the song together because he goes into this weird mode that's different than the chords of the song. And it kind of takes you out of it at the beginning and in the solo. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a great counterpoint in there, And again, it sort of shows you kind of the intensity of thought that goes into a 2-minute Dwarves song, as opposed to the average rock band. That would be a 5-minute song, and a lot less thought would go into it.
Totally. And I think that speaking about the length of Dwarves songs, I mean, I think that it's such an interesting. Well, I mean, it's another testament to you guys being really good at your craft, which is that you have everything in this tiny amount of space. Like you can make a song like The Devil's Level. It has everything that a pop rock, like a pop, rock song, I guess for intensive purposes, let's call it that, has in it. It's got that intro riff. It's got the verse. It's got the banging chorus. It's got like a solo section. Like there's everything, but it's like
and the emo guy's trade-off between the melodic guy's voice and the crazy guy's voice.
Yeah. It's got everything in it, and it's like what, 1 minute and 27 seconds or something like that.
Something like that.
It's wild. It's like, you're manipulating time somehow to fit everything. Like if that song was done by some other band and was like 5 minutes or something, like I think it would like it's obviously an amazing song. Maybe like I listened to that song on repeat, so maybe this isn't the best comparison, but I feel like other bands that put all the the verse, the chorus, the verse, the chorus, the bridge, the solo, the end chorus, it's like it's boring,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to have a song like that if you continue to make it challenging and interesting throughout. And again, tempos have a lot to do with it, and genre has a lot to do with it. On the Ralph Champagne thing, the songs are a little more expansive. There's more of a tendency to stretch things out. With the Dwarves, it's a very compressed thing. It's a very much the idea of like, we're getting everything we can in here.
Yeah.
And sonically, it's like, okay, here's everything we can cram in here. And then other kinds of records have more air to them, and you value that. But yeah, and that to me isn't even a new thing. It's a return to an old thing. You find me the filler on a fucking Beatles song. I mean, aside from some of the abstract stuff that they did later in their career. I mean, there's never any filler, and you're never sick of it. And, it's like now song structure, everybody has to put a pre-chorus in everything. I mean, I love pre-choruses. A good effective pre-chorus is one of the great joys of my life. I mean, if you look at the pre-chorus and like We Must Have Blood, it's not that we don't love you, it's just that we don't get it. It's like that kind of makes the song, or in Better Be Women, you say you try but you don't get none. The pre-chorus is a beautiful thing. But who the fuck said that every song has to have a pre-chorus? And now, I mean, every single pop song has exactly the same structure. It's maddening to me. And a lot of it's filler. And it's like, why did you put this filler in here? Because, we are the pop industry, must have pre-chorus, so it's like, okay, dude, it's fucking boring, it's like, put in a pre-chorus if you need it.
Yeah. Put
in a bridge if you need it. Put in a solo if you need it, And a song like FEFU could have had a solo, but it didn't need it. It went straight to the breakdown because that was what needed to happen there. I mean, it and of course these things are subjective. People sit there with their boring arrangements and go, this is what I'm hearing in my head. It's like, okay, I get it. Your fucking head's boring.
Totally. Were you guys like big fans of the Beatles? Because I was looking at this thing earlier. I was like, This guy looks like somebody.
Saltpeter. I mean, it was that was he's my Sergeant Pepper. Yeah, so I mean, Saltpeter was obsessed with the Beatles. I love the Beatles. You know, it was funny because Nick Oliveri wrote a song called Nowhere Man. And I was like, you wrote a song called Nowhere Man? And he's like, yeah, don't you like it? I'm like, well, yeah, I like it. Are you familiar with Nowhere Man by the fucking Beatles? It's like, I'm not going to write a song called Stairway to Heaven, you know? It's like, you know, I mean, you know, but yeah, everybody's different. You know, I think for Nick, you know, his touchstone would be more Black Sabbath. You know, I think for the Fresh Prince, his touchstone is really more the Stones. You know, but I consider my touchstone to be Zappa more than the Beatles. You know, I stand in awe of the Beatles. They're and I can't really, I don't know if I like it or not. It's the first thing I ever heard.
Right.
Literally, when I got my first red, white, and blue phonograph, that was, you know, my parents brought home from Woolworth's drugstore, you know, you know, Let It Be was the record that they brought along, you know, that it's like, I can't conceive of not the Beatles. I mean, I've been indoctrinated into that, you know, so fair. I love them and I'll always love them. I don't even know objectively whether I do or not, you know, you know, I was molested with it as a child. So
that's right.
You're
conditioned
I love it.
to love it. That's funny. So let's go back to the punk rock days. Now I want to ask you this question. Like you've been in the scene for a pretty long time. I mean, like, you know, close enough to its inception and throughout the years. So with the, you know, the shows that you guys put on, there's some wild stuff. Obviously, the stuff that you write about is pretty wild. Now, I want to ask you, what's the most fucked up shit you've ever seen? And I know a lot of people are like, well, there's just too much to really say. Everything, there's a lot of fucked up stuff, but I feel like everyone knows deep down in their heart of hearts when you say what's the most fucked up thing that you've ever witnessed or seen.
I get asked that, and I think it's just the nature of how my brain works. You know, I try not to dwell in the past. And when I do find myself dwelling in the past, it's not a pleasant place to be. And people throw this phrase around a lot of PTSD, you know, but you know, I have eliminated a lot of the things from my brain that were harsh and weird, you know. You know, man, I got stabbed, I got guns pulled on me, I wound up at the hospital. You know, I was attacked by people over things I said. I was attacked. You know, sometimes it was my fault. I was throwing beer bottles around. It just, to me, it was like being aggro. And it's like, hey, I don't like getting hit with a fucking beer bottle. You know, I mean, so I'm not going to say I didn't have any of it coming to me, but I don't consider myself to be a violent person. And, you know, that stuff disturbs me. I don't disavow it. It happened. I encouraged it in some ways, and I, you know, was a victim of it in a lot of ways. You know, I mean, I don't know how great a story is. I know you're just looking for a great anecdote. I mean, if somebody was sitting here and brought up a funny anecdote, I would laugh along and go with it. But I just don't go down that mind path. If somebody reminds me of something that was hilarious or some crazy chick that did some weird shit, okay, great. You know, but, you know, I kind of, you know, to me, the band was like an artifice, and it made people feel like you could get raped or murdered or burned up, you know, but, you know, that wasn't what I was trying to do.
Yeah,
you know? You know, I mean, I remember entire venues just turning into brawls. I remember playing at in Los Angeles at the Coconut Teaser, which was kind of a heavy metal place on Sunset. And I mean, there was no back door. I remember getting, you know, it was like we were just besieged by people. And I think there's video footage of this, and I was just fighting for my life. And, you know, finally I'm like, fuck, I got to get out of here. And I look behind me and I open this door behind the drum kit, and there's nothing there. It's like a crawl space that you would literally get crushed in, like at the Who concert. I'm like, well, I can't go back there. I mean, there's just nowhere to go, you know? And it was like, fuck, you know, I don't want to die on stage playing rock and roll. Like I, you know, I mean, it'd be kind of cool. It might be a cool movie, you know, but I don't want to die, you know? So it's like, you know, in Richmond, Virginia, I remember being jumped. They got the sound and light guys in on it too. I guess they were mad at us from the previous show from the year before that I had already forgotten about. And somehow a bunch of people went there like loaded for bear. You know, they were all ready to attack us, and they worked it out. And they had the sound man, like, you know, playing the music while the light guy shut off the lights, and they came, but it was like they were so dumb, they rushed the stage. We're standing there. I got a mic stand in my hand. I used to do Freddie Mercury style specifically so I could hit people. and fucking my guys have guitars. I mean, we beat the shit out of them. And, you know, and it was like, fuck, what was that? You know, like we just got attacked for coming out on stage and playing. And then I remembered, oh, last year there was a bunch of fucking hicks here that got mad at me over something, and everything got weird and blah blah. So I mean, yeah, you know, there were these fights, you know, to stay alive, you know. But for me, I really just wanted to make a great record, put on a great show. I consider myself an entertainer. And I was fascinated by people like Gigi Allen that were, you know, I mean, I hung out with Gigi. I visited him in maximum security prison in Michigan. I put him up at my house. I respected his songwriting. I thought he was good. You know, and the rest of the shit amused me. And I was young, so it was like, yeah, whatever, man, I'll do whatever. Like, I was a young person, and I'm still a person. I'm not scared of shit. I don't walk around scared. Big guys beating the shit out of me, I'm not scared of them. You know, people threatened me or came after me, I'm not scared, you know. But at the same time, I'm not out there like, okay, you know, you know. And I looked at Gigi at the end, and it was like, my mission is to kill you and rape everybody and blah blah. And I was just like, why don't you write another funny song? You know, I mean, it was like, I think people approach all this shit differently. I don't know if that's the greatest answer. You know, I mean, I wouldn't trade my rock and roll memories, and I have them, but you know, the worst thing about the rock and roll scene now is how sedated it is, and how people are just afraid of everything, and how in punk you can't even say what you want, let alone do what you want. And I think people have, you know, like I said, I'm not a violent person. The people from the Dwarves are not violent. There's lots of footage of me being violent, so you could cut this with me hitting somebody and go, oh, hey, you know, fuck. But, you know, it's like violent is as violent does, you know. People who want to do that are different than me, you know, in my opinion, you know. But at the same time, there's this fear of physicality now. Yeah. You know, it's like, what's better for a kid, you know, to that's getting bullied? You know, the best thing for a kid that's getting bullied is to fight back and smack the bully and get himself some revenge and some peace of mind and feel autonomous. But what they do now is they pathologize it. They pathologize the bully and the bullied, and everybody's sick and everybody needs someone to talk to. And it's like, hey man, we're still primates, you know?
Yo, total. Like, I think
you're not making that kid feel better by telling him he's sick and that he's incapable of fighting back because it's the wrong thing to do. It's like, no, you know. So I mean, I you know, I have mixed feelings about it. I don't really apologize for all the violence that went down and all the way that people acted, but it's not me, you know. I would always rather just walk away from an altercation like that, and I would always, you know, I've really hurt people and never felt good about it at all. And then I've been hurt by people and seen people really gloat about it. You know, like, yeah, man, you know, we got him, that fucking asshole, you know. It's just like, dude, you know, go play football or something, you know. Like, that's not what I was doing, you know what I mean? But Yeah, I mean, long story short, been a lot of sex, a lot of violence, and that was kind of the currency.
Well, I mean, I think like that's something that kind of became synonymous with the Dwarves, right? It's like, because I saw you guys in 2007 in Ottawa here in Canada, and I think we got. I'm going to show you a picture here. I think I got 3
Wait, you're
songs.
in Canada?
I'm
Wait,
in Canada.
I'm
Yeah,
out of here. Wait a minute. I can't.
you can't. It's, no Canadian, no Salt Lake City, no Canada. This was me, I think 3 songs in um at the show in 2007 in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And I was awesome. I mean, being honest, I don't remember too much of it. I drank a lot that night. But for anyone that's going to end up listening to this or watching this, I just want to make this public because I've been searching for this for years. Is I ended up, after that happened, and I didn't remember how it happened. I was told later that someone pushed me onto the stage and my head went into one of the monitors and like broke
Yeah.
my glasses and everything. And I do remember stumbling over to the barman and being like, "Hey man, do you have a like some ice or something I could put on my head?" And he was like, "Get the fuck out of my bar. You're bleeding everywhere." Like kick me out of the bar.
Yeah. There
And
you
so
go. Yeah, that's
I
rock, I mean,
yeah. So I got kicked out of the bar, and then I step outside, I light up a cigarette, and I like smoking the cigarette, and my friend walks out of the venue, and his face is covered in blood as well, and he is lighting up a cigarette. We have this moment where we're both like, "What the fuck happened to you?"
we
And
do this thing on our website. You have to do this in exchange for this interview.
okay,
You have to call up and tell that story about you and your friends getting your heads knocked in and what happened to you. It's right on the front of our website. It's just it's one of the buttons. You can go
really?
to shows and merch and stories. Just hit stories, and you got to leave us that story. That's exactly what this band is about. Yeah,
100%, 100%.
And for the record, I love Canada. Hilarious people.
I was worried there for a second. I was like, "Oh."
You know what? Canada has a lot more funny, hilarious comedy than America does per capita. There's so many brilliant comics from there. Canadian bands, it's always been a little weird, and I don't know. I was always looking for a band to like from there, and could never quite find one.
But the Riptides, you guys did a split, right?
The Riptides are friends of mine. The Black Halos, friends of mine. Cool bands that play great shit. But it's like Australia. I was like, okay, at least they got AC/DC kind of thing. I was like, okay. I don't know. I don't know what happened with that.
We got Celine Dion and Nickelback. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. But part of it is just demographics, right? There's so many fewer people there. But it's like if you watch the British American Idol versus the American one. I mean, they both suck, but the British one really sucks. Like you're like,
That's
whoa,
true.
really? Yeah. So I mean, it's I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I'm a huge
Canadian
fan.
bands
And very attractive people in Canada. The people are so good looking there. I'm always taken aback by it. It's kind of like a whole country of Salt Lake cities. People are good looking in Salt Lake City. They are. It's these bastions of genetic superiority or whatever. I don't know what it is.
The Mormon genetics. For some reason,
I don't know what it is. It's wonderful. As a Mediterranean, I love to pollute their gene pool. Let's put it that way.
Fantastic. What's your background then? Mediterranean?
I'm Italian, Greek. Culturally, that there's probably some Middle Eastern in there and stuff genetically, but I don't know what it is.
Did you ever take a DNA test?
Yeah. And there's supposed to be some of that, but mainly they just lump Greek and Italian together. I guess they're so similar genetically that's just kind of what it is. And my whole family was Italian, and there was a Greek element in it.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever think those DNA tests are like not 100% accurate? Like I got one myself, and I was like it costs money, so I wasn't going to do this, but I figured like, what if I were to put like some dog saliva in there and send it back, like would I get human results to be like,
Well, at first they told me that I was part Jewish. I think they gave me 4 or 5% Jewish. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I've always been I come from a very Jewish town and I've always been very pro-Jew. And I thought, oh, well, that might explain it. Then about a couple of years later, somebody told me, oh, you check it again, it changes. When I went back, there was no Jewish at all. Like, okay.
Okay. Very interesting.
I don't think they know either.
It's all just guessing. I've written some questions down. Oh yeah. I gotta ask you, the phone recordings that are in all the records, are those all real?
They're all real.
They're all real.
Yes, they're all real, and none of them are like, "Hey, call me up and say something." They're real. The one that's caused me an interesting thing when I was at Epitaph was people got very upset about the one about the 14-year-old girl that comes before Better Be Women. And people asked me, is this real? And I said, yes, this is real. And then they had to kind of sit me down and go, hey, man, like, I don't think that's very cool, And it was like, dude, the phone message is real. From a real 28-year-old woman celebrating her birthday who said that she was 14. Get it? It was real.
Amazing.
So it's like, this is how you tweak with people's minds, man, that everybody jumps to these conclusions. And, they never go to the reality of, hey, he's probably not a child molester. They immediately go to the reality of, oh, gee, so yeah, it's funny.
That's great though. That's so fun to have that, like, sort of like hammer on the gas, then take it off, and then hammer back on. It keeps people, keeps people engaged in a funny way. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about the album art. So
some motion on this smoothie. I want you to know that.
Yeah. So
it's doing that thing where it's liquid at the bottom. It's more like a 7-Eleven slushie.
Fair enough. Well, those aren't bad. I mean, they're bad for you, but they taste all right. The album covers. So like we've got kind of a running theme, I would say, throughout the album covers. I'm sure you're aware.
Tits. It's tits.
It's tits. Production value. So the
vaginas.
Where did that all, like, was that so like a collaborative band thing? Did one person say it'd be awesome to have tits on the cover, or was that like an external thing? Like, was any record label kind of like,
cool? The person with the aesthetic of that was saltpeter. He always loved pornography and would cut things out of his porno mags to make posters for our shows. I'm not a terribly visual person, like I like vaginas in person. I'm less interested in them, the two-dimensional version of them. And at that time, that's what pornography was,
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw how it affected people, and, basically my thought was like, the Dwarves are, musically we're sounding a lot like the Misfits or the Ramones or the Cramps or whatever, but there was a decidedly sexual theme to the lyrics. And so I thought, okay, let's push this. The thing that really struck me when I moved to California from Illinois was how asexual the punk scene was. And there was especially in Northern California, there was this pronounced undercurrent of like, oh yeah, all those rock star heavy metal assholes and their chicks. We're not like that. Like, we're friends with our chicks and they're ugly. And it was just like, that's what people were into, and I was like, look, I'm not into heavy metal and I ain't much of a rock star, but goddamn, dude, I playing rock and roll. I'm trying to get my dick sucked. I don't know what planet you're on. And so, I fucking really pushed that aesthetic. And then I think Blood, Guts, and Pussy was where it really came into its own because it was an art shot. It didn't look to me pornographic. And that was when I knew that that was going to be my motif. I don't like pornography and I'm not interested in it, although I certainly will watch lesbians whenever they come on. I can't help it. But you know, it's I shouldn't say I don't like it. I mean, I'm not against it. I mean, go ahead and jack yourself off. I you know, whatever gets you through the night, but it's not my aesthetic. And so just having tits and ass on the record, you know, I think in most of the shots, if you look at the ones that I was there to kind of art direct as best I could, I mean, these were good photographers, good models, good set designers. Again, I have really no aptitude in that. But I know what I like. I think the better shots really scream art. They are an art shot. So it's a nude in the same sense that the Venus de Milo is a nude or whatever, right? It's This is a thing of beauty and it's the female form. At its best, I think that's what we've attained. At this point, there have been so many of them, and so many of them were done just by little labels and people that I wasn't involved with, that some of them don't have the art element. They're just more like, here's some tits again for you, you know. But for the most part, I think we've managed to skirt that line between it's titillating, you know, it's pornographic, but it's art, you know. And so that, you know, in a nutshell, is sort of what I was always searching for with those records. And I think now with Ralph Champagne, I need to find a new format. You know, I need to find something else that the covers are about. You know, so that's going to be a whole nother odyssey.
Or you could just lean right into it and have like a naked woman like pouring a bottle of champagne over top of her. If you angle it right, it can be artistic.
Right. That's right.
Do you think these album covers have like contributed to the success of the band at all?
I think they've contributed to an underground notoriety and brought us to the attention of some collectors and music fans that wouldn't have bought it. But I think they did a lot more harm commercially than good. And again, it's the same as saying the word fuck in a song does you more harm than good, unless you're already famous, right? So if you're CeeLo and you're already happening and then you sing, you know, fuck you and blah, 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 then it's like, oh, isn't this cute? And it's something like, you know, if you stake your career on like, yeah, you know, nudity, obscenity, it hurts you really badly commercially. And it also hurts you critically. Right, because people say that you're just hiding behind something facile and easy. They say, well, anybody can slap tits on a record. Okay. You know, anybody can scream fuck on a record. Okay. You know, I look at it just the opposite way. The facile, easy thing is when you let yourself totally be dictated by what's already come out. You know, just put a picture of the band on the front. Here's us. We're the band. If we're cute, bonus. Some of you girls are going to like us. You know, I mean, it's just like, what, you know,
yeah.
And this is what most bands are doing. That's the song most of them are writing. That's the production most of them are getting. That's the show most of them are playing. Hey, Cleveland. You know, I mean, this is my business. It's full of mediocrities. And you're rewarded for that mediocrity. You know, and so and I've been penalized specifically for, you know, for those covers and marginalized and you know, they don't review me in Pitchfork magazine, but you know, if you're twee and you stand there in your old sweater, then you're worthy of being reviewed. You know?
So weird. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Speaking of like the lyrics and stuff like that, that's kind of holding you back. I was looking at some lyrics online. Like I know that you guys tend to not include the lyrics like with the records.
Yeah, sometimes we do, but often the lyrics are wrong that you read online.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, because I'm like looking at some lyrics right now on Genius, you know, and it's like I
Get
mean,
a little smoothie here to fortify me.
Nice. Is it one of those like healthy smoothies? All the green stuff.
It's all fruit. I don't know how healthy that is. There's a lot of sugar in fruit.
Fair. I mean, at least is it natural fruit?
Yes, it's a natural fruit.
That's something then. But yeah, let me read you some of these lyrics here. So this is like the last chorus of FEFU. It says here on Genius, the lyrics, I want to fuck, I need a ride, but they need it stuffed. Yeah.
No.
That's not right.
Not the lyrics.
I need a light, but the needle's
I want to fuck. I need a line, but the needle's stuck. I got no love for those who suck. I want to fuck, eat, and fuck you up.
There it is. Now Genius can change the lyrics because it's been wrong for probably since the inception of that.
Whoever
website.
put that up is not a genius. Let me say that.
I feel like it's not like hard to hear, you know. It's like we were talking about clarity in a song like that.
I wonder why you would write that down.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, you'd have to love the band enough to do it, and then you'd have to be ignorant enough of the lyrics to do it.
Yeah.
I just don't see how that gets there in the first place. I'm always fascinated by that kind of thing.
It's so weird. There's another one that I was curious about, so I looked it up. This is for Dead on the Floor. So here, this is the second verse. Genius again has, she tells them nothing but lies. Now she's whore to the flies, a memory to despise, empty the core. They had a wake at the beach. Someone made noise.
So what was the first line again?
So the first line here from that second verse is, she tells them nothing but lies.
Okay, so it was she told them nothing but lies. So I don't see how you get tells from told.
They sound completely
told them nothing but lies. Yeah. And now she's Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies makes perfect sense, but this person heard
to despise and to deplore.
That's what it sounds like in the song.
They had a wake at the beach. Someone made marshmallow treats, then covered her with a sheet. Who was it for? The raven said, nevermore. Again, you know, there are a lot of references to 20th century novels and 19th century poetry in punk rock, you know, but hey, don't ask me, I'm dumb and I say fuck in songs. So I don't know. What do I know? You know, how about we do another song about your girlfriend and how she made you sad? Let's do that.
I love that someone would have confused Lord of the Flies with whore to the flies. He must have said whore to the fly. Like you've never heard of Lord of the Fries is what I said, Lord of the Flies. But yeah, I feel like that there's a lot, like almost every single song that I look up by you guys, I'm just like, I'm kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, who would have heard of that? It doesn't sound at all like that.
I mean, probably at some point I should go on a big jihad and at least put the lyrics on Apple Music or whatever. But maybe what I'll do instead is just like make a book of it. You know, like just make a book and say, okay, here's all the lyrics.
Yeah, like Danzig did. You have like a comic book artist to illustrate like a specific comic for each page. Do you know about that book that Danzig made?
I don't, but I would love to have it. You know, he was a huge influence on me and on the band. The Misfits are absolutely one of my favorite groups ever.
The best.
And you know, just a brilliant group. Danzig came to see TSOL when we played with them on Sunset Boulevard a few years ago. And I was very excited, but it turned out he came in, you know, right after we were done. I guess he timed his entrance so it would be before the lowly opening group was done. Oh. You know, he probably had no idea who we were or that we probably sound a lot more similar to him and what he likes than TSOL, who are also great friends of mine and good dudes, but don't sound much like the Misfits.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how things go. I mean, I think he the impression I get is that he takes himself pretty serious.
I think everyone gets that impression at this point.
But I could not find it in myself to criticize the man, considering just how much I owe him musically. I mean, it's staggering. So it's I'll leave that there.
I totally get you. I'm always on the fence with it too, because I'm like, I've been like the earliest punk rock days that I experienced in my life were all Misfits, and it's like, and I followed Danzig's entire career. I own every single record from Misfits to Samhain to the Danzig stuff to the most recent stuff. Like I have the friggin' Elvis covers album on vinyl, and I'm like, I'm just on the fence sometimes, but I love the guy, and obviously it's impacted my life and many people's lives.
In 1983, I saw their poster and that they were playing at the Metro in Chicago. And so I was like, oh, this kind of looks like the Cramps. I'll go. So I went, and they were terrible. And I never really thought about them again. And then a couple years later, I was involved with a woman in New York, and she said, "Do you know the Misfits?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I saw those guys. They're not very good." And she's like, "You're crazy, dude." And she gave me a cassette, and I was just hooked for life. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is amazing. And I like all three periods of them. I mean, I like the kind of pre-hardcore period, and then the Walk Among Us period, and then the kind of supercharged hardcore Earth AD period, and yeah, I think the Dwarves pretty openly cribbed from that, never in direct plagiarism ways, but in ways that were like, reconstructing things and cutting things up and putting it here, but it's kind of obviously comes from this root of the Misfits,
Totally.
So yeah, I feel like I owe them a lot artistically, and they mean a lot to me. I would love to get to play with them or hang out with them or whatever, but they, to their credit, they became these enormous rock stars long after. I mean, that show in Chicago didn't sell out. People didn't care about the Misfits. The reason people started caring about them was because Metallica covered 2 of their songs. If it wasn't for Metallica covering those Misfits songs, then it would not have ever taken on the scope that it did. So I was a sort of different sort of fan. I loved the Misfits and didn't care about Metallica. that was me. But no.
That's and I think all that to say that Danzig is awesome and everything he's contributed to the Misfits and everything that's kind of created is pretty awesome. So
I also Who Cannot Be Named I got from a Samhain record.
There you go. Yeah, I was
Not
actually
that you ever heard a Samhain record or would have known about it, but I knew about it.
So if I read online that you met He Who because he had like a sweet organ or something, like a Farfisa organ.
Yeah, exactly. I was looking for somebody that had a 60s Farfisa organ, and a friend of mine that I went to high school with was like, "Hey, you should meet this guy," Then I got arrested and I had to go to do public service in Waukegan, Illinois. And so I was in the area and I stopped by and we hit it off, and I liked his organ. And, we were friends ever since, made a lot of music together.
What drugs have you done? Do you still do it? Like there's a lot of drug talk in the music.
I started smoking marijuana when I was about 12. I think it, rewired my brain in some ways that might not have been so great. Marijuana is pretty much my thing. I've done every drug, LSD, mushrooms, heroin, downers, speed, coke. I did all the drugs. And I think I'm lucky, I don't have a terribly addictive personality. I didn't like booze a lot. I used to drink. I since my mid-20s, I've probably drunk twice, I think.
Wow.
Both times to get drunk, um I was never an alcoholic. I'm just not interested in it. I can do a hit of coke and not do it. um I'm the kind of person who might have a hit of coke sitting at my house for a year. Or somebody goes, "Oh, I wish I had some coke," and I go, "Oh, I got some," and they go, "What?" Like leftover coke, right? Like there's that band Leftover Crack. Like who has that? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't care about it. I would do it once in a while if I felt like it. So I got very lucky with that stuff. I mean, that shit. I had friends that took acid, lost their minds, and wound up at Bellevue. I had friends that wound up schizophrenic. I obviously had friends that OD'd and died on heroin and pills. I had, friends who've been strung out on speed since I've known them, and makes their personalities very odd. And, no one escapes that shit. And you play around with it at your peril. It's kind of funny because, on the one hand, I have compassion because I did all the drugs and I'm a drug person and okay. And on the other hand, I have no compassion at all because it's like, look, man, you takes your money, you pays your money, you takes your chance, right? That's the deal. Nobody told you doing drugs was going to be good for you. You knew it wasn't. If you're smart, you won't fuck around. If you're dumb, you will, and you might get in trouble. That's how that game works.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
I think I lucked out, but I wouldn't advise anybody to do it. You might think my music is advising you to do it, but see, I look at my music as a sort of extension of the id. So it overdoes everything about drugs, sex, violence, and death. And it underplays any more three-dimensional aspects of humanity and how people should live, right? And so for that reason, people assume that I'm that way. It's understandable, but it's, look, I mean, I always wondered, do people think Anthony Hopkins eats people? Is that your belief? Do you think that Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from another planet in the future, or something?
Well, actually, with that one,
yeah, maybe could be. But it's always been funny to me. Bruce Springsteen's been riding around in a limo for 60 years now. Do you honestly believe that he's your working class hero? Like, okay, man, believe whatever the fuck you want to believe.
Totally.
But anyway, the nature of my music is very id driven, and drugs are part of that.
Totally. Do you think that as I mean, I feel like punk rock, even to this day, well, maybe less these days, but up until the recent past, let's say, has been very connected with the drug scene as well. And that's an interesting thing I always find is that it's almost like, I don't know, like people that don't do drugs kind of get a bit of a bad rap, like they don't. I don't know. Some punk scenes are not too welcoming to people that aren't into that. It's almost like it's a necessity to be part of the gang or something. Do you find that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how much you succumb to peer pressure in all ways, I generally find people can resist if, look, I mean, try not drinking. I mean, that's not just in the punk scene, everywhere. Everybody looks at you like, what, are you uptight? It's like, no, I don't like drinking,
Yeah.
You have to have the strength of your convictions and be able to go, nah, I'm not into that. And then you got to power on, But yeah, people like to be backed up in everything they do. If you're hanging out with a bunch of people and they all drink, and then somebody shows up and they're not drinking, then it kind of, is like, hey, are you saying I'm not a good guy? Are you saying that I'm doing something wrong? People, it's
Yeah.
That's the I don't I think nightlife in general has been tied up with drugs and alcohol all along.
Hmm.
And those scenes that were like teenage youth center daytime kind of shows, which is sort of more of a European phenomenon, but they still have them here too, is a little different. The thing I never liked, hey, look, I respect people that don't do drugs, and again, I tend to look at them to help me with things. So my production partner Andy, no drugs, no alcohol. Eric Valentine, no drugs, no alcohol. It was like, look, I'll be the cool guy and do something stupid. You guys be smart and do this. So I gravitate toward people like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm dating somebody, I'm looking for a nice preppy girl who's cute and keeps herself up, and somebody shows up all tatted and pierced and on dope, that's not the girl I'm looking for. It's like, I can handle that. You fucking handle this. So, everybody likes their different things, I guess. But the part of rock and roll I never liked was that very clean, like, we're putting on shows here, and our parents take the tickets. Everything's so nice here, and we're all just trying to support the scene and have a scene and do nice things. And it was like, look, dude, stretch the fuck out. You do smoke this. Just shut the fuck up. Drink something, because if you're bringing your mommy to the rock show and doing your shit, then whatever, dude. There's other jobs you can do. Can you go do them? Go play tennis and bring your mommy there. That's wonderful. This is rock and roll. It's still, it's not supposed to be that,
Totally.
That's my take on it. When it became very hip in the punk scene to believe in God and be clean and, bring your parents along for the ride, it was kind of like, look, I love my parents, dude. My parents are great. But they part of my punk rock lifestyle, and I don't know. As generations change, right now you get people whose parents really were punk rockers,
True.
Great. Okay. People whose grandparents really were punk rockers. Okay. I get it. But to me, you got to find your own way. And that's part of what rock and roll is about, punk or not. It's about finding your own way and finding your own tribe and finding your own people. And so when it's a little too everybody's being a good boy, then it's kind of like,
for sure.
Why don't you just do something different?
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, with regards to your music, I read or heard in some.
You can keep talking. I just give me 1 second.
Yeah, for sure. I read or heard somewhere on the internet that, for you, a big part of making the music is to reflect on the art that you've created and be like happy with yourself with the, with your abilities put onto this record and that you can hear back. I'm curious because I talk to a lot of musicians and it's like this weird sort of thing where it's like some people listen to their music a lot. Other people don't listen to their music because they feel like it's weird. From other people's perception, it's weird to like, it's almost self-indulgent or something. So I'm curious from your perspective, do you find yourself listening to a lot of your own music?
I have to listen to so much of it before it comes out that it can be difficult to listen to afterward because it's like science class. I've listened to it 1,000 times. But no, I don't mind hearing it because it fills a gap that I want to hear, The corollary to that is I don't really listen to a lot of music. I spent my whole childhood, youth, and young adulthood listening to a lot of music. I still listen to music when it comes up. I'm still surrounded by people who want to listen to music. But, after a while, it's like, hey, we're eating dinner. We need music. Hey, I'm getting a massage. We need music. Oh, hey, we're going to fuck now. We need some music. Hey, we're driving in the car. We need music. It's like, I don't need music for those things. I listen to music to listen to music. So, I don't listen to a lot of it anymore. So I don't listen to my stuff or other people's stuff or whoever's, But if it's time to crank some rock and roll, then I'd just as soon you throw on a Dwarves thing than you throw on a Ramones thing or a Misfits thing or something I like. But I'd rather hear something brand new that I haven't heard that I like, but I don't hear a lot of that. People aren't really turning me on to that stuff. So yeah, I mean, but I know what you mean. Some people have a trip with it. I don't. I mean, again, I think the more famous you are, the more maybe you have a trip with it. I'm not that famous. My music is not heard everywhere all the time. So I like hearing it. Apparently people told me in LA, they played the Dwarves right before the Misfits went on. That made me happy. I was like, great. All right.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Wish I was there and I could have heard.
Do you have like any do you have a favorite Dwarves record or favorite Dwarves song?
I have 3 favorite Dwarves records that mean a lot to me. They all mean a lot to me. I mean, they're like your kids and all that. I wouldn't trade any of them. But I think there's 3 that really are perfect on their own terms. The cover and the content and the production and the lyrics and everything comes together, and it's just like, this is what it's supposed to be. And Blood Guts was the first one like that, and then I think Young and Good Looking was the next one like that, and for me, Must Die is the next one like that. Must Die kind of escaped a lot of people's attention. I think was one of those things. It had more of a pop mix, not that it was a pop record, but it had a little more drums and a little less guitar. And so for a lot of people, that's just a turn off right away. But for me, that's like the most intensely produced punk record I've ever heard. Every song is different. It hits every different genre. It's full of guest artists, whether it's, San Quinn, the gangster rapper, or Dexter Holland, the big hit punk guy, or, Nash Cato from Urge Overkill, or, guys that I knew from my travels in my life, buddies of mine, and, people I knew from this and that and the other thing, and DJs, and it's just such an intensely produced record. And it was the last record that I really got to do with Eric Valentine, where we recorded it together and we mixed it together. And so, that one is very special to me. And I hadn't had that feeling about a record where I just felt it was, I wouldn't put out a record if I didn't think it was an A. The 3 records I just mentioned to me are my A+ records.
Nice.
The new Ralph Champagne one makes me feel the same way. It's a whole new sound. It's different. And I just wouldn't change anything on it. And it's really Andy Carpenter and the guys who played with it on me, Josh Freese and Tom Ayers and Angelina Moisoff, and a lot of people who just were amazing players and really gave me this complete thing, that let me see my vision. So yeah, those are sort of the ones for me. As much as I love talking about myself, I do have some things going on that I have to go attend to now.
Not a problem at all. It's been a while. Definitely, I wasn't intending for it to go this long, so I definitely appreciate you taking the time out. I know you got a lot of stuff.
Talking to you because you're so knowledgeable about the band and you really are interested in these things, and I'm interested to talk about it. So holler at me anytime.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely awesome. And again, it's an honor to talk to you, and keep on rocking. I cannot wait for this Ralph Champagne record and any Dwarves records in the future. I know you got a show coming up on the 12th.
We're going to make, I've made so many overproduced Dwarves records now that we're going to make a primitive underproduced Dwarves record next. I think we need a couple of those to return to form.
Fucking A. Love it. Cool, man. All right, I'll let you go. And thanks again. I'm looking forward to all this music.
You got it, bud. Great talking to you. I'll see you soon.
Cool, man. All right, laters.
How cool was that? Shame he had to go. I wish I could have talked to Blag for like 10 more hours, but maybe another time. Either way, check out the Dwarves online concert this Saturday, June 12th, online, I guess on the Dwarves website. Ralph Champagne, new solo record from Blag coming out. like and subscribe to Distorted Frequencies, and check out our next episode, which is going to be just as cool, if not cooler.